Hello again and welcome. Welcome to the business channel, Sparring for Leaders, powered by Sparta Performance Systems, your global training, consulting, mentoring, and sparring company. Yeah, welcome on. My name is Roland from Roland Media. I welcome you. And today we have a very amazing topic. It's about the benefits and the power of peer groups. So some people are really fighting alone against the windmills, and it's not really helpful to fight alone and be isolated. So it makes absolute sense to peer up with others. It has many, many benefits. And I'm very happy that I can welcome a keynote speaker, award-winning author, a trainer, a facilitator, a podcaster from Canada, Leo Bottary. He will join us soon. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel. If you like the content, share the video with your business friends. I'm more than happy. So stay tuned. Leo is joining us in a few seconds. Thanks a lot. Hello, Leo. Nice to meet you and good morning.
Good morning, Roland. Great to be here today.
Thanks for joining. I really highly appreciate, for our audience. I know that you're joining at 6 a.m. in the morning. It's quite
Yeah,
early.
you can watch the sun come up in Southern California here today, so we'll see.
Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot for joining us on quite early this morning. Thanks a lot. Yeah, Leo, the topic today is the power of peer groups. I know that you're a keynote speaker. You're really into it to this topic. You published some books, The Power of Peer Groups, a published books about Peernovation and different stuff. So tell us, our audience, a little bit about your background before we start.
Sure. And it really kind of speaks to how I got interested in this entire topic. I graduated college in 1983. I didn't go back to graduate school until 2006. So in college in 1983 and in high school prior to that, you'd go to class, the teacher or the professor would be in the front of the room, you'd take notes, you'd get quizzes, you'd write papers, you'd be, taking exams, and you're shielding your paper from the other people in the room and all of this. Then fast forward to graduate school, and I'm part of a learning team. So it was interesting because any thought of collaborative learning would have been called cheating back in the early 80s, right? So now here we are, in mid 2000s, or that first, decade of 2000. And it was an incredibly rich experience. And what became very evident is how true it is that we learn better when we learn together. There's just no question about that. And following that, I not only stayed and taught in the program eventually, but I also was very interested in a position that was available as head of corporate communications, which is really what my field was, for Vistage, who assembles and facilitates peer advisory groups for CEOs and business leaders around the world. This is where CEOs or key executives come together in groups of anywhere from 8, 10, 12, even up to 16 or 18 people in a room from non-competing industries, and who come and just help each other grow their businesses and help each other make good decisions on behalf of their people and their companies. And so it has been, an incredible journey, really beginning acquainted with what that's all about. Very similar to what I dealt with in graduate school, and to watch CEOs do that for one another and to see the difference it's made in so many people's lives. And we'll get into how and why they work. But near the end of my time at Vistage, private equity had purchased the firm, and there was, a move that, they asked me basically if I would lead a brand refresh at the company, which I did. And so I'm going around the country, mostly the US and Canada, and I'm asking, like, right, to these CEOs and key execs, like, how do you learn? How do you grow? How do you bring new thinking in your company? And to a person, they said to me, well, I read books, I have a coach, I hire consultants, I go to events and conferences. Some said they went to executive development programs at places like Harvard and Stanford, but nobody was suggesting that a peer advisory group was even in their consideration set. Mm-hmm. So when I was reporting out on the rollout to the board of directors, I also shared the experience I was having with them in the field and saying, look, we've been at this since 1957. There are groups all over the world who facilitate peer advisory groups for business leaders. And I feel like every one of us is trying to sell a Mercedes to someone who doesn't even know what a car is. Mm-hmm. So this is where, the idea really for the first book came about, where it was pretty basic in that let's put together a narrative, not some kind of hardcover brochure about Vistage and how great we are and what we do, but look at the entire category and give people a book where they want to know what peer advisory groups are all about and why they're so powerful and so effective for so many. At least they have a place to go do that. So I wrote that book. That was published in March of 2016. There are two subsequent books as well. One that steps outside of formal peer groups and just gets people to think about all the people who surround us in our lives and how we can do a better job of enlisting, engaging their support, for our benefit and for theirs, as well. And then last but not least, Peernovation was published in 2020. I've done now well over 500 programs with peer advisory groups and/or teams inside companies, where it became very evident that not only have the models in the original book evolved quite a bit, but we're basically looking at the fact that you can take these principles that have been working so brilliantly in these groups for so long and bring them into the teams at your company and really take them to a whole new level. So that's, in a nutshell, kind of where we are right now.
Well, thanks, Leo, for sharing that. I can absolutely relate what you're talking about in school and university. I went to school in the 70s, university in the 80s. And I was trained, to be competitive, better than the others. And, don't share your secrets, don't share your solution when you find something, you're writing like this and stuff like that. And if you share something, as you said, it was cheating. And I remember in 2000, I joined a 4-year training, a personal development training, and a very famous Austrian trainer. And we've been in large groups, and he said, we are large groups, and really to get deep into the topic, we have to do some homeworks. And he highly suggests peer groups. And we all said, beer groups? And somebody said, I don't want a beer, can we have wine or something like that? So we didn't understand the term at all. We heard it for the first time, beer, and we understood beer group. So and I found out working, it was a kind of challenge to work in groups, to be open, to learn to listen, but not debating everything, and and how to say, just be open to other ideas and share other ideas and acknowledge other ideas and take it into consideration, stuff like that. It was a huge learning process, but it made it was a tremendous game changer for my learning and for my learning experience. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's there's no question. I mean, first of all, social learning theory, there's mountains of academic research and books and all about the fact that we learn better when we learn together. Josh Bersin, who's well-known consultant, in the field of organizational development and all, basically painted a picture of this using something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which talks about how we retain information. And he basically said, look, if you or I, for example, were to read a 800-word blog post, on average, we'll remember about 28% of it for 24 to 48 hours. If we read it a second time, that number climbs to 46%. However, let's say you and I and a group of other people all read the same article and we spend some time talking about it and grappling with the concepts and sharing experiences. Now that number goes to 69%. So groups not only create these conversations, create neural pathways that allow us to really have the information that we're learning become, far more sticky, but because of the way groups engage one another and members engage one another, it isn't just, the intentional learning part, right? Where we get content in some way, shape, or form, whether it's from a book or a TED Talk or something like that. When we engage one another and we work hard at addressing challenges or opportunities and all, and we, again, kind of grapple with the various concepts and ideas, involved in that, we experience what's called collateral learning. And collateral learning comes from what you learn from how you learn. So this is where you really build muscles around, to your point, right? Being present, being a really good listener, asking precise questions, not jumping to conclusions, rushing to judgment, making assumptions about things, right? And the better we become at that, not only do we become more valuable to the group, but we become far more valuable as a leader back at our companies.
Yeah, absolutely. What I also learned is in its experience, I'm still really love is because everyone has a different perception, some a very selective perception when we read something or when we study some work. So everybody has a different, I would say, a different map of the terrain. Yeah, everybody sees something different. And so it's more holistic when you bring different people together with different eyes and ears and senses. But it's also that, people learn differently. When we talk, for example, about the formal system, some people need a strong why. Some people are more interested in the what, other people in the how, other people in the future. So it makes a tremendous change when different aspects comes together, and really the fruit is a much juicier one at the end.
Oh, no question about it. It's kind of interesting when you talk about that, because on one hand, the group benefits from how they are the same and what they share, but also how they're different. So, for example, if you put a bunch of CEOs in a room, the amazing thing is they share the common challenge of knowing exactly what it's like to sit in that chair and have responsibility for an entire organization. They can't look at things only from an HR, sales, finance, legal, or whatever lens. They've got to look at all of it with all the responsibility and all of the affected stakeholders with that. So to be in a room of people who share that and have that empathy with one another becomes really huge, because everybody in there knows what that feels like, what that's all about. They also tend to come to agreement, at least over time, over the values and behaviors they know are going to be helpful to them all being effective contributors to one another. What that looks like. You mentioned a few of them about being open, about being vulnerable, about being curious, about being there to learn, a growth mindset. All of these kinds of things where when you put that together, that starts to create real cohesion and real value in the group. On the other hand, how they're different matters too, because you want a lot of different voices around the table. People who represent different industry sectors, whose path to CEO may have been through finance or HR or marketing, right? Or, there's countless ways that people bring, different perspectives to the conversation. And one of the things I always enjoyed being part of a group is someone might say, hey, I've got a challenge. And they define that challenge, and we start asking questions, so that we can understand more deeply what's going on here. What's always interesting to me is someone in the course of that conversation will ask a question, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, if you gave me a month, I wouldn't have come up with that question. That was such a great question. And oftentimes it takes the conversation in a direction that is really rather remarkable. And I think, to your point, it's those different perspectives, those different maps that people have, that will inform and inspire them to come at an issue in a certain way. Sometimes people talk about these groups as a place where you get non-biased advice. No, you don't. You get very biased advice, and that's okay. Yeah. The idea is being transparent about what those biases are. I grew up much more in the marketing communications world. I'm never going to look at the world like an engineer. I'm never going to look at the world quite like a finance person does, for example. So as we all bring those perspectives to the table, it becomes very enlightening and very powerful. And again, it's how people learn and grow, and how they get, ideas. We talked a little bit just before we get started today about the fact that when you have people from various industry sectors, so let's say I run a manufacturing company and there's a bank or a hospital CEO right in the room, and they talk about how they do something that may involve people, for example, that you're thinking, wow, that is really cool. No one in my industry does that. And you're thinking to yourself, well, okay, that could really work for us. And it might even be a competitive differentiator if we're able to do it. The only way we're going to learn practices that really happen outside our industry sector is to get outside of our industry sector and start picking our head up and kind of seeing what's going on in the world, because it's so easy to be heads down. We all work so hard in our businesses and all of that, but yet there's so much richness out there. If we can take just a little time, even if it's just one day a month, one half day a month or whatever, to engage with people like this. And I think it opens an entire world of possibilities to folks. And that's why peer groups, A, are so effective, and B, why there's so many more of them sprouting up all over the world today, more than ever before.
Thank you. And Leo, what I understood from your conversation and also from your books is that there are several benefits for sure for peer groups, like you learn from other successes and failures, you get new ideas, new perspectives. It's rich in resources because everyone has a different research background, resource background. As I said, somebody is from HR, the other one from technical stuff or user stuff. You get personal support. You're not alone. You don't miss anything because, as we said, when you have a very biased or a selective perception, you don't miss anything because there are more eyes, more senses on a concept, on a work or whatever. So it's a lot of benefits. In the second part, I want to talk about or learn from you is in a practical way to set up a peer group. What is necessary, or what is absolutely necessary that a peer group runs well? And I would split it in what kind of mindset should I have when I join? What skills should I bring in, and maybe what kind of structure is necessary that's successful? Like this.
That's a big question, a good one too. When we think about assembling a group together, I think first of all you're thinking about, well, why are we meeting? What are we looking to do? How do we want to help one another? What does that look like? I do think you've got to come into a group like that with a real beginner's mind, right? And with that feeling that you can be open with the group and transparent with the group. And maybe over time, as you get to know the members better and you get to know one another and you really start caring about one another's aspirations and what that looks like, then you become invested, in the people around that room. And when that happens, then the guards start coming down and you start being really helpful to one another in a way that is very powerful. So I think it's that growth mindset. It's that curiosity. It's that willingness to be open and vulnerable, because psychological safety becomes a very key component of these groups running effectively, right? The, feeling that, again, you can share in that room personally and professionally. It's always fascinating, I think, when people join these, quote, business peer groups, how much personal stuff is talked about. Because the reality is that there are things, excuse me, going on in our lives where they affect how we show up, whether it's to our group or to our companies. And sometimes we need some place to go with that. And again, oftentimes people do it when they can sit around a table with people who, again, share the common challenge and responsibility of being a CEO and really be able to open up about things that they can't really do with their staff or with their board of directors or even things they don't want to bring home all the time. But just to be in a different place with that, I think, is extraordinary. And so there's a bit of that in terms of, the benefit. And, this idea of lonely at the top isn't so much about loneliness and as an alone standpoint, as much as it is how easy it is to get isolated when you're in that position of CEO. And I think what starts to happen when you bring CEOs together is that it helps them not feel quite as isolated.
So when starting a peer group, would you suggest that people start with a common setup, have a setting that everyone agrees? Who is in lead, or is there a moderator, or what would you suggest from the structure?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. When we were writing The Power of Peers, and I actually co-authored this with the CEO of Vistage at the time, we looked at a number of different models around the world. Some were run very similar to how Vistage was run, where they have a chair. And the chair is the de facto leader of the group. And they run the groups, they set the agendas, they arrange for speakers to come to join the group, all things like that. There are other organizations where they have members who get some facilitation training, and the member is actually the one facilitating the group. And then in other situations, whoever happens to be running the meeting that month or whatever, maybe they kind of take charge that month and facilitate it. the interesting part is no matter the model, the role of the leader of the group is very similar, right? And the responsibility and what makes them effective. First of all, that they are a servant leader, that they are there in that role, not for their own self-aggrandizement or to pad their resume. They're there because they care about everyone else in the room. Ultimately, again, whether it's a chair or whether it's a member, they play that role as being a part of the group, not apart from it. So it's not like the leader's over here and everyone else is over there. And this is something that we think about in our companies as well. As CEO, ask yourself, do my people in my company feel that I'm a part of the team or apart from the team? No. Right? But then also, there's a 5-factor framework that we've set up, which is basically you have to have the right people in the room. You have psychological safety. You've got a productivity is really be important, that there's a healthy culture of accountability that the group finds among one another to help them, basically achieve what they've already expressed they want for themselves, right? So, and then of course there's a leadership piece, but part of the role as the leader, even though they are a part of the group, not apart from it, they also play a central role in making sure that we've got the right people in the room exhibiting those right behaviors that keep us really effective, that we enjoy an environment of psychological safety. And by the way, not just that the environment is psychologically safe, but that people are actually using it. They're really stepping in and engaging one another proactively. That we're as productive, right? If we're a half-day meeting, full-day meeting, we're squeezing every minute possible of leveraging all the intellectual and emotional capital in that room to be able to make our time together as effective as possible. And then again, last but not least, having that healthy culture of accountability, where in my view, it isn't about coming in there and playing defense, like about people beating you up about what you're doing or not doing or whatever. It's very much accepting personal responsibility for bringing your very best to every single meeting and to one another, and to making sure that you're following up and following through when it comes to action items. So let's say very quickly a group meets and there's a challenge I have, and I hear a lot of great thinking about how I may address that challenge. And I say, okay, great. Here's what resonated with me. Here's what I'm going to do going forward. Which, by the way, there's 2 things here, right? One, I own the solution. No one telling me what to do. I am kind of extracting what that is. So owning that solution makes it far more likely that it will, get implemented. But you basically go through that process so that you are bringing, I think, your very best back to your own companies.
Okay, thanks for that. A question I have from your experience, because you're facilitating many groups, is when we talk about group performance, at the end it's about performance. We want to bring up a result.
Sure.
Anyway, when we talk about group performance, we have this the stages you're familiar with. We have the storming, norming, forming, performing stage.
Forming, storming, norming, performing. Yeah, Bruce Tuckman.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, from your experience, how can peer groups speed up to jump from level 1 to level 4 to get them performing? CEOs are very busy.
They are, and it's so interesting.
Shortcut.
So when I talk about programs that I do for groups, there's a program that I run. There's 2 of them. One is for brand new groups just getting started, and the other is for groups that have been around for a long time, but who really are thinking to themselves, you know what, we've been at this for a while. We want to up our game a little bit. So the first one is who you surround yourself with matters. It's for brand new groups. The second one is harnessing peer advantage to your advantage. And what those workshops do is exactly what you're talking about. How do we, either as a new group, accelerate our ability to really be effective with one another? And then in the second one is how do we fine tune, what we can be doing so that we can, it's easy sometimes when we do something for a long time and we may not always, be as disciplined about certain things as we were before. We may, use our time a little differently, and maybe as members sometimes change over time, needs change, as well. I think, though, when you think about what makes a group productive, it's how what are the benefits that people are really getting from the experience and what they can point to, and what that involves and what should involve for everyone is that every single person in the group is very clear about what they want from the group. And I don't mean diverse perspectives and these kinds of things. I mean, I want to take my company from here to here. I want to grow as a leader in this way. I want to expand internationally, or I want to move my business online, or I want to take on different product lines, whatever that may happen to be, where you can benefit from the perspectives of the people in that room to help you make those things happen. The more clear you are about what it is you truly want, the more clear it becomes when it comes down to evaluating what success looks like. It also helps everyone else understand how they can help you and how you can help them. So the more transparent you are with one another about what everybody's looking for, then people really dig in and help one another be really successful.
Yeah. But that's a very good point, to be very clear about and be transparent. Because sometimes I hear when I run groups, okay, what's your expectations? Yeah, I want to be surprised by the group. I said, what?
Yeah, all those things are going to happen. That's all well and good. But the point is that, what do you really want? And this is tricky. People aren't always good at expressing that. They'll tell you, well, what I don't want is, and they'll launch into that. But you pin them down and say, okay, no, what do you really want? Like, here we are today, 6 months from now, a year from now, paint a picture for us about what ideally that would look like, and try not to be this is where the vulnerability comes in, right? Because, people don't want to put a stake in the ground sometimes and feel like they either are going to fail at it or they're going to quit with it or whatever. And the point is that you've got a group of people around you to support you. They're going to support you and challenge you in a way to help you make those things possible. This is, in some respects, it's a bit akin to, people go to a gym, they get a personal trainer, or they train in groups, and they do that because left to their own devices, it's not going to happen when they're alone. There's very few people, have that level of self-discipline. And because of that, we need one another. And I think we help one another, pretty extraordinary ways.
Yeah. And actually, it's part of our humanity to support others. We are willing to support.
Sure.
But you have to know what the other one wants or is expecting. Yeah.
There you go.
We cannot deliver what the other one doesn't want because the rest is too much, It's infinite possibilities. We have to clearly communicate very, very narrow, a clear communication. Leo, for our audience listening to us to say, hey, that's an amazing, I didn't think about peer groups. I didn't know about the benefits. For those who want to start enthusiastically, say, let's set it together, okay? I bring some CEOs together, some business friends together. What should they keep in mind or consider? What are some no-goes or some traps?
So I think, this kind of speaks to, is a peer group right for you? So if you are that person who you're just never going to be the person who wants to share or be vulnerable or really be willing to help others, a peer group is probably not right for you. If you can be that person, I think you're going to see that how generosity just really inspires, some incredible things. And, being part of a group can be really powerful. And I'd say there's a couple of ways to think about it. Back in 2011, Bill George, Doug Baker wrote a book called True North Groups. Mm-hmm. And True North Groups are basically kind of a bit of a guide as to, if you were going to start your own peer group, this is maybe how to go about doing it. I think that could be a really great option for a lot of people, no question about it. However, there are countless organizations around the world that do a really great job of this. And they have a methodology. They have a system for it. They have resource speakers that they bring to the table. They've got all kinds of networks that they create. So you can not only connect with CEOs in your neighborhood, if you will, but all over the world. So there's something to be thought of, there as well. So you look at organizations in the US like Vistage and YPO and EO, and of course they have global reach. And then in Europe, obviously EGN, runs many different groups, and not just for CEOs, but for folks at all kinds of levels in all kinds of industries and all of that. So, I would say if you're interested in looking at being part of a peer advisory group, kind of explore some of the websites, of those organizations to get a sense of what they do and how they do it. Ref Global is another one. They're actually headquartered out of, Lima, Peru, but their presence is growing in the U.S. and the U.K. And in different countries right now, and also have a really great model. So I would say the point and the reason, again, that we wrote the original book, The Power of Peers, not as some book about Vistage. We just felt like, let's make you familiar with the category. Mm-hmm. And then you pick the group that's right for you, that you feel matches kind of what you're looking for and who you are and the time and the investment you want to make in it and what that looks like for you. So that would really be my suggestion, I think, for any listener out there. And all I can tell you is that anyone who's in a peer group, the one thing they will tell you is, I wish I had done this sooner. Mm-hmm. That is the number one response, I think, when people are asked about how they like their peer groups and what these peer advisory groups have meant for them, not only for their careers, but their lives and their employees and their families and their communities. And so I think that's a really worthwhile, pursuit.
Right. Thank you, Leo. Thank you, Leo. Well, actually, I will, in the subscription of the podcast, I will write down your contact details. Do you have, you mentioned some organizations that are operating worldwide. Do we have links on your website for these operations?
Sure, I can send you some links too. I'll put a few together and I'll send them to you after the show, and you can include them in the show notes. And again, these are just to offer a few examples of things that people can check out, again, and based on their geography and what they're looking for, and whether they're looking at virtual groups or in-person peer groups or some combinations of the two. There's some great stuff out there. And by the way, some people may be interested in industry sector specific groups. They're not all where you go to a group and everybody's from all kinds of different industries. Rex Roundtables is another organization, fantastic organization. It deals in the health and fitness industry. And there's actually enough diversity in that sector, but they also really help one another, and they create, essentially an apples to apples playbook where they can work and help each other, grow. And they do a remarkable job, and they run, all over the world as well. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. And I think once people, do a Google search or whatever, and all of a sudden it opens up to them as to how, prominent this whole category has become, then they can see opportunities for themselves.
Thank you. My last question, Leo, virtual groups as good as in-person groups, or is there any difference?
Sure, there's a difference. But, there's an aspect of each has their advantages and disadvantages. And by the way, I don't think that it has to be this or that. Why can't it be this and that? Right. So I can be part of an in-person group where I can meet with CEOs that represent the local economy. We come together and we do our thing and help each other and do what we need to do. Right. On the other hand, maybe I want to connect with people around the world, or maybe my travel schedule is such that I want to participate in a group experience, but I can't physically be there in a reliable way every single month all the time, right? Sometimes virtual groups tend to be a little smaller, where people can dig in a little deeper, and also because they tend to run for less time, it just creates a different dynamic. But both, when they are well run, can be absolutely excellent. And again, I wouldn't necessarily choose this or that. I think there are opportunities, in both areas that could be really helpful. But again, you may make that decision based on your personal kind of schedule and travel and all of these other kinds of things. So,
Leo, thank you so much. It was very interesting again, talk to you. I highly appreciate it. Thanks a lot. There's a lot of learnings for our audience too. And as I said before, we're gonna share your contact details later so people can contact you or find more information in their area or on the globe, wherever.
Please. Yeah, visit my website, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. And and I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you here on the show today, Ron.
It's an honor and pleasure. Thanks a lot, Leo. Thank you. Yes, this was Leo Bottary. I don't know what you've got thinks, but I guess it's very, very helpful. And most people, most managers, most leaders are not really used to work together in peer groups and brainstorm in peer groups and support each other in peer groups. As it's and as Leo said, it's really a trap that we get isolated in our roles. So I highly, highly recommend it. Have a look at peer groups. As we mentioned in our conversation, we will deliver some links here where you can find out different organizations organizing peer groups around the globe, and maybe we'll find one that fits to you or fits to your industry, fits to your. Thanks a lot again for joining in, for jumping in here at Roland Media, this time at the business channel Sparring for Leaders, powered by Sparring Performance Systems. I'm Roland, and if you need any help, I'm based in Austria. In Switzerland, Germany. I speak German. German is my mother language, but I also speak English and Spanish. And with my team, we also support you around the globe in Salesforce trainings, coachings, executive coachings, whatever your need. Thanks a lot. Thanks for sharing. And also thanks for subscribing the channel. See you soon. Bye.